Good Tuesday morning, everyone. Welcome into today's daily Bible reading for March the 14th. Today we are reading together in Exodus chapters 37 and 38, which is going to continue talking about the instructions being carried out for the construction of the tabernacle and the various components of it. Remember, prior to chapter 32, in chapters, we'll say 23, 24 through 31, Moses is on top of the mountain, where he's at the top of the mountain with Yahweh, and he is receiving the instructions concerning the tabernacle and its components. Chapter 32, there is the golden calf incident. And then following that, Moses mediates for the people, and he goes to bat for them and speaks with God concerning them, and they are allowed to enter into the covenant with Yahweh once again. And the instructions are given, they're repeated once again, and now they're going to begin to be carried out. They started to be carried out. Let's see here in chapter 35, we read about the tabernacle being built. Bezalel and Aholiab have been hard at work. So far they've done the tabernacle. Well, I guess we read just about the tabernacle. Now in these two chapters of 37 and 38, we're going to read about the ark being made, the table, the lampstand, the altar of incense, the altar for burnt offering, the bronze basin, and the courtyard. And then we're going to close out chapter 38 looking at the inventory of the materials that have been given in order for these things to be made. So we'll read about that, and then I'll pull up a illustration that I found on the internet, the interwebs. You can find just about anything. It looks pretty good. The language is a bit different because of translation and such, but I think it does a good job of illustrating what this complex would have looked like, and even gives you an opportunity to see kind of a size comparison. If you're familiar with what a football field, kind of that size, you'll see how this particular complex would compare to a football field. So keep that in mind. We'll look at that here in just a few minutes. Let me get Exodus 37 and Exodus 38 on the screen for us, and we'll get to reading here in just a second. Exodus 37, verse number 1. Exodus 37, verse number 1. Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, 45 inches long, 27 inches wide, and 27 inches high. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and out, and made a gold molding all around it. He cast all 4 gold rings for its 4 feet, and 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other side. He made poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. He inserted the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark for carrying the ark. He made a mercy seat of pure gold, 45 inches long and 27 inches wide. He made 2 cherubim of gold. He made them of hammered wood, he made them of hammered work at the 2 ends of the mercy seat, 1 cherub at one end and 1 cherub at the other end. At each end, he made a cherub of 1 piece with a mercy seat, or with the mercy seat. They had wings spread out. They faced each other and covered the mercy seat with their wings. The faces of the cherubim were looking toward the mercy seat. He constructed the table of acacia wood, 36 inches long, 18 inches wide, and 27 inches high. He overlaid it with pure gold and made a gold molding all around it. He made a 3-inch frame all around it and made a gold molding all around its frame. He cast 4 gold rings for it and attached the rings to the 4 corners at its 4 legs. The rings were next to the frame as the holders for the poles to carry the table. He made the poles for carrying the table from acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. He also made the utensils that would be on the table out of pure gold, its plates and cups, as well as its bowls and pitchers for pouring drink offerings. So far we've seen the ark, we've seen the table, now the lampstand in verse 17. Then he made the lampstand out of pure hammered gold. He made it all of 1 piece, its base and shaft, its ornament cups, and its buds and petals, 6 branches extended from its side, 3 branches of the lampstand from one side and 3 branches of the lampstand from the other side. There were 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with a bud and petals on one branch, and 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with a bud and petals on the next branch. It was this way for the 6 branches that extended from the lampstand. There were 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms on the lampstand shaft, along with its buds and petals. For the 6 branches that extended from it, a bud was under the first pair of branches from it, a bud under the second pair of branches from it, and a bud under the third pair of branches from it. Their buds and branches were of one piece with it. All of it was a single hammered piece of gold. There, he also made its 7 lamps, snuffers, and fire pans of pure gold. He made it all, or he made it and all its utensils of 75 pounds of pure gold. He made the altar of incense, verse 25, out of acacia wood. It was square, 18 inches long and 18 inches wide. It was 36 inches high. Its horns were of one piece with it. He overlaid it, its top, all around its sides, and its horns with pure gold. Then he made a gold molding all around it. He made 2 gold rings for it under the molding on 2 of its sides. He put these on opposite sides of it to be holders for the poles to carry with it. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. He also made the holy anointing oil and the pure, fragrant, and expertly blended incense. Chapter 38, verse number 1, Bezalel constructed the altar of burnt offering from acacia wood. It was square, 7.5 feet long and 7.5 feet wide, and was 4.5 feet high. He made horns for it on its 4 corners. The horns were of one piece with it. Then he overlaid it with bronze. He made all the altar's utensils, the pots, shovels, basins, meat forks, and fire pans. He made all its utensils of bronze. He constructed for the altar a grate of bronze, mesh under its ledge. Halfway from the bottom, he cast 4 rings at the 4 corners of the bronze grate as holders for the poles. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with bronze. Then he inserted the poles into the rings on the sides of the altar in order to carry it with them. He constructed the altar with boards so that it was hollow. He made the bronze basin and its stand from the bronze mirrors of the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then he made the courtyard. The hangings on the south side of the courtyard were of finely spun linen, 150 feet long, including their 20 posts and their 20 bronze bases, with silver hooks and silver bands for the post. The hangings on the north side were also 150 feet long, including their 20 posts and 20 bronze bases. The hooks and bands of the post were silver. The hangings on the west side were 75 feet long, including their 10 posts and their 10 bases, with silver hooks and silver bands for the post. And for the east side, toward the sunrise, 75 feet long, the hangings on one side of the gate were 22.5 feet, including their 3 posts and their 3 bases. It was the same for the other side of the courtyard gate. The hangings were 22.5 feet, including their 3 posts and the 3 bases. All the hangings around the courtyard were of finely spun linen. The bases for the posts were bronze. The hooks and bands for the posts were silver, and the plating for the tops of the posts were silver. All the posts of the courtyard were banded with silver. The screen for the gate of the courtyard was made of finely spun linen, expertly embroidered with blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. It was 30 feet long, and like the hangings of the courtyard, 7.5 feet high. It had 4 posts with their 4 bronze bases. Their hooks were silver, and their top plating and their silver bands were silver. All the tent pegs for the tabernacle and for the surrounding courtyard were bronze. This is the inventory for the tabernacle of the testimony that was recorded at Moses' command. It was the work of the Levites under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, made everything that Yahweh commanded Moses. With him was Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, a gem cutter, a designer, and an embroiderer with blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and fine linen. All the gold of the presentation offering that was used for the project in the work of the sanctuary was 2,193 pounds, according to the sanctuary shekel. The silver from those of the community who were registered was 7,544 pounds, according to the sanctuary shekel. 1/5 of an ounce per man, that is half a shekel, according to this sanctuary shekel, from everyone 20 years old or more who had crossed over to the registered group. 550 men. So 603,550 men. There were 7,500 pounds of silver used to cast the bases of the sanctuary and the bases of the curtain, 100 bases from 7,500 pounds, 75 pounds for each base. With the remaining 44 pounds, he made the hooks for the post, overlaid their tops, and supplied bands for them. The bronze of the presentation offering totaled 5,310 pounds. He made with it the base for the entrance to the meeting, the bronze altar and its bronze gate, all the utensils for the altar, the bases for the surrounding courtyard, the bases for the gate of the courtyard, all the tent pegs for the tabernacle, and all the tent pegs for the surrounding courtyard. And that concludes Exodus chapter 37 and Exodus chapter 38. All right, so again, within these chapters, the ark is made, the table, the lampstand, the altar of incense, the burnt offering, or the altar for burnt offerings, the bronze basin, and the courtyard. All these things are under construction within these particular chapters. Let me throw up this this illustration of what this complex very well might have looked like. So here it is described obviously as a tabernacle. That's what it is. But what the tabernacle is, and I think this is important for us to recognize, is that the tabernacle is a portable temple. A temple was just the place where heaven and earth overlapped. It's where God's presence was able to dwell in this natural world. And you've heard me talk about before, the idea and the concept of temple goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. That was a place where God's presence was. It was there. And then from there, it's also with the tabernacle, and then with the temple, and then Jesus, and then finally us. So this is simply, again, a place where the spiritual world overlaps with the non-spiritual, the material world. So this is a temple, what we refer to as the tabernacle. And again, another thing that's important to recognize that it's portable. As we read through the descriptions and then the construction of these various objects, how many times do we read about rings being used through which poles would be stuck through so they could be carried? It's good to remember that this is a portable complex. It was not intended to stay in one place, which is why this construction seems to make it pretty easy to be broken down and then to be put back together whenever they came to a stop as the people. So here within these chapters, again, we saw the ark. The ark would be in here. This little place right there would be where the ark is. It speaks about the cherubim and the legs and the rings and the poles that were used. We find that, and the instructions for that can be found in chapter 25 and verses 10 through 22. Second is the table. I believe the table is, it's this portion right here. Let me double check this. Let's see. The table, yeah, that'll be right. This table right here would be, double check, just make sure. Yeah, the table right here would be the table where the bread of the presence would sit upon, I do believe. If you want to read more about that, that's chapter 25 and verses 23 through 30. Then there is the lampstand, which is right here. You can find that in chapter 25 and verses 31 through 40. The altar of incense, let's see, it would be this right here. You can find that in chapter 30 and verses 1 through 10. Now, all this, of course, this entire place right here, this section would be the holy place, where the priest can enter in, but of course the high priest can only enter into this section right here, the most holy place. The altar of burnt offering would be right here. I believe, let me double check to make sure that's correct. Yes, the altar burnt offering right here would be where the sacrifices were made. Again, this is in the courtyard. This is in a much more accessible place. You want to read more about that, you can find that in chapter 27 and verses 1 through 8. The bronze basin right here where they would wash can be read more about in chapter 30 and verses 17 through 21. And then the entire courtyard here, this entire enclosure, can be read about in chapter 27 and verses 9 through 19. Now, what's cool is up here, this little section shows us, I believe the way this is the size of the football field would be from back of the end zone here to the back of the end zone over here. So we're looking at 120 total yards from back of the end zone to back of the end zone. And that seems to make sense because this right here being 150 150 feet would equal about 50 yards, which does put it a little less than half of the size of a football field. So if you want to imagine kind of the size of this entire tabernacle complex. Imagine a football field from the 50-yard line to the end zone, to the goal line, and that's about the length of the tabernacle complex. And then it's much shorter in its width. I believe, let me double check to make sure. The width would be, let's see here, only 75 feet long, I believe. So we're looking at only about 25 yards wide. So about half of from the sideline to about midway across the field. So that's just kind of cool to see kind of the size that we'd be looking at for what this for the size that the tabernacle would be. There's some descriptions over here of the various things. One thing I found interesting was they refer to outer coverings of badger skin. Now I went and looked, and it seems as if let me see if I find it again really quickly, 27. There was a Hebrew term that's used that is pretty obscure, and nobody's exactly quite sure what the term means. As you see on the screen, they render it as badger skins. In another one of these descriptions, I read somewhere else, it talked about it being the skin of a sea cow, which I guess would be referred to as a manatee. I'm not quite sure. At least that's what we would understand. So some of these things are just a little bit difficult for us to understand just because we don't quite know what these particular words mean. So that's just an interesting thing that I saw as well. Although we do see ram skin dyed red. That's a pretty common thing that we understand that these things are made out here. But just the color of what's going on here, the symmetry, it's just a really, really neat. I appreciate this illustration giving us this neat insight into what is going on here. There was another thing that I wanted to to mention, if I can find it. It was just a cool way that the tabernacle was described. I'll see if I can find it real fast. It was pretty neat. It was something to the extent of, or the idea was that the tabernacle, with it being sacred and holy space, it was a place of peace and calm in the midst of a chaotic world. That makes sense from the perspective of the symbolism of the tabernacle, because the children of Israel were in the wilderness, and the wilderness is often described as a dangerous and chaotic place. But here within the tabernacle system, within the tabernacle complex, was a place of peace and safety for the people, where they could take their minds off of the stress of the outside wilderness and focus just on the goodness of this particular space, this being where God dwelt. I don't quite see that note anymore. I'm trying to find it, maybe mention it again another time. But if you have any questions or comments about this text, what's being described here, what's being built, or if you have any questions about the illustration on the screen, please feel free to leave those in the comments section, and we'll discuss those further. Appreciate you tuning in for this reading on this Tuesday. As we look at chapter 37 and 38, we will continue reading and look at chapter 39 tomorrow, which is going to describe the making of the priestly garments. And then at the end of that text, we're going to have an inspection by Moses of the tabernacle, just to see how things are going in its creation and it being constructed here within these few chapters. Again, thanks for tuning in today, everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we'll be back at it again tomorrow with chapter 39. Take care, and God bless.